I just spent the last 2 weeks in Costa Rica. 7 of those days, we hosted 120 people, subject to the human condition. That means they were all human beings. And we hosted them in Costa Rica. It was myself, Anand Mehrotra, who many of you know as someone I've interviewed a number of times for the Recovery 2.0 online conference series. Also a man who runs the Sattva retreat center in India, where we bring groups every year to come visit there and partake in that sacred land and to do our yoga and our meditation and to learn and to grow. So Anand came from India all the way to Costa Rica to be with us. Kia also was one of the leaders of the retreat, my wife and myself. So the 3 of us were teaching, and it was super, 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 super profound. And so I thought, hey, we'll just come right back into the United States of America, where I live, and connect with all of you wherever you live and talk about this thing called the consciousness of recovery, the consciousness of recovery. So really, I kind of want to give you an experience this evening. And so I'd like us just to meditate for a few moments here, just a few moments to get grounded and get centered before we go through this process that we'll all get to join in together. If you happen to have a piece of paper and a pen nearby, that would be a great thing, or a journal, or whatever you take your notes in. So you'll want to grab that. So I'd like you to sit up nice and tall. And even if you're sitting in a chair like I am, rather than going up against the back of the chair, sit up nice and tall with your spine straight and turn the palms face up and just bring the thumb and forefinger together and place the backs of your palms on your knees. And allow your eyes to close. Sit up nice and tall. Palms face up, thumb and forefinger together. Allow the eyes to close. Inhale, draw the shoulders up. And exhale, let the shoulders relax fully. The eyes are rolled up slightly, focused to the brow point. It's that area right between the eyes, right here. And take a deep inhale. And a full exhale. Deep inhale. And a full exhale. Deep, deep inhale. Full exhale. Take your deepest inhale. And your fullest exhale. Gently come into this space, become aware of your body. Gently allow the eyes to open. Okay. So, consciousness. To expand one's consciousness, I'm looking at it as the building of awareness, meaning you could look at your life right now and you could go through a process, as we'll go through, of looking at how you've become more aware than you used to be through your recovery process. The building of awareness begins, actually, in a sense, it begins with understanding what you're focusing on, where you put your attention. So I want to take you through my 28 years of recovery and explain consciousness of recovery through the different periods of my recovery. Okay, So I'm going to start with a week before I got sober, 1 week before I went to treatment for the first time, for the only time. I was in Boulder, Colorado. My life had become entirely focused on getting high. I was using the kinds of drugs that were so powerful that it had taken control of my nervous system. It had changed the frequency by which I operated. So using heroin, cocaine, alcohol, marijuana, in various combinations, 7 days before I got sober. What I was aware of at the time was things weren't going well in my life. The focus was on the fact that I did not have a girlfriend, that I had not, in fact, been with a girl for some time, that, in fact, no girl would really come near me at that time unless they were also in the depraved state that I was in, the depraved state of addiction, really stuck. I was aware that I had no money, and I was aware that I needed money, not because I needed to pay for school, not even really because I needed to eat, but because I needed to get high. And so I was aware of the need for money, a constant pressure each day, have to have money. I was aware that things with my family were not going well. That was not a point of denial for me. Things were just not going well, and they had not been going well for some time. So my consciousness had been sort of sculpted around this idea of seeking relief. That the sum total of my efforts at that point, 7 days before I got sober, the sum total of my efforts were geared towards seeking relief from pain. I needed relief from pain. The pain I was feeling was emotional in the form of sadness, anger, resentment, loneliness, separateness, a feeling of being disconnected. I'm aware, on some level, I'm aware of those things. The pain I'm also feeling is physical. I've got physical pain in my body as well. I'm in a weakened state. Let's just put it that way. I'm in a depleted, weakened state at this point, 7 days before I get sober. And so all of my attention and all of my awareness is going towards solving the immediate problem that I have. And the immediate problem that I have is pain on all these levels. I should add also that there's a spiritual pain that I'm going through, which is this feeling of the end of possibility. Whatever your dream is, whatever you hope for, the thing that you always wanted to have in your life, you're starting to realize that you're never going to have it. And there's a real sadness to that. There's an unbelievable sadness to that. 3 days before I got sober, I got involved in my last major drug binge. It was a 3-day bender. It would last all the way until the day I got sober, that first time. And through that experience, my awareness got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. My awareness now was single-pointed. My purpose, my effort in life was geared toward one thing and one thing only, and that one thing was to get high, to not come down from the drugs that I was currently taking, which at that time was crack cocaine. If any of you had had the unfortunate, the misfortune in your life to have experienced a relationship of any kind with crack cocaine, you know that it is a truly depraved and craving-centered experience. So I lived in craving for those past 3 days, for those final 3 days. Okay. Now, when I woke, I went to bed, if you could call it that. I went to sleep, if you could call it that, after that binge. And I woke up 30 hours later. And at the end of that 30 hours, I had fallen asleep sitting up. My legs were in front of me on the bed. So I was sitting up against the headboard, and my legs were extended out in front of me on the bed. 30 hours. I should have, at least, the very least, I should have gotten severe nerve damage in my legs. I might have crippled myself for life. For sure, when I woke up 30 hours later in the same position that I went to sleep in, I couldn't move. I literally was paralyzed for 15 or 20 minutes. I rolled to my side and I purposely fell off my bed. What I was aware of, what was in my consciousness at this point, was a sense of utter horror, despair. I was cornered, desperate. I was only aware that I was no longer high, that I owed money to a potentially dangerous drug dealer, that I had no connection with my parents or my family, that I had no money, and that I was alone. All I could direct my mind to do was to try to problem solve my predicament. I went to everything. What form of manipulation? What kind of control? Was there someone that could come save me? And there wasn't. There was nowhere left to go. I was absolutely cornered. And all I could think to do was to call my father, which I've told this story many times. I called my father, and he was very much there for me. And through his tears and his utter frustration with his son's demise, a little door of grace opened for me. And I told him in that moment that I would seek treatment. Okay, now I want you to really get this in terms of this conversation of consciousness. Inside me, just like inside you, there is pure consciousness. Over that pure consciousness is your conditioning, your family, your friends, the environments that you've been in, all the influences upon your life, your genetics, your epigenetics, all the food you've ever eaten, all the things you've ever ingested in terms of media, the books you've read, the TV shows or the movies you've watched, all the conditioning of society, veiling that pure set of consciousness, that pure light within you, that pure awareness, consciousness. Think of it as the part of you that is watching all without any reaction, just the part of you that's watching, observing. Like if you just touch your right shoulder right now. Here's my left hand, I bring it to my right shoulder. The fact is I can feel that I'm touching my right shoulder. I'm aware that I'm touching my right shoulder. I have awareness of it. My consciousness in this moment is paying attention to me touching this right shoulder. It's just a pure witness. It's an awareness. That's all it is. That's in me. And it's in you too. We'll come back to that in a moment. Now, when I made the decision in that moment to go to treatment, it was as if there was a blankness. I couldn't remember very much in that moment. I couldn't remember very much, and I certainly had no idea where I was going. It's almost like that scene in The Matrix where they're put into a completely white space. It's like an empty canvas. In that moment, there was an interruption in the pattern, interruption in who I am. Interruption in all my effort to try to save myself from this pain. Interruption in the never-ending, unceasing effort for me to stay high. Interruption in every way at the level of mind, body, and spirit. And I'm there in a form of limbo. I'm not aware of much or conscious of really much either. I don't know what's going on. I only know that a pattern has in that moment been uninterrupted. I'm going to call it surrender. I'm going to call it true surrender. I literally surrendered to the point where I couldn't even remember who I was, what I was doing, where I was going, where I had been, where I was from. There was just a complete and total blankness to the canvas of my life. I'll call it surrender. It was a release of all effort. Almost like I felt like my life was no longer in my hands, that I was putting myself into the care of something else, other people, another process, a spiritual thing, a God thing, or whatever your word for that would be. And when I got to treatment, when I actually got there, in my memory, the thoughts were, I somehow have to get through this. I've left my world as I know it. I somehow have to get through this. Something's been wrong. Something has been terribly wrong. I've failed. All my efforts in life brought me to this place. I'm aware of this feeling of shame. I'm aware of this feeling of loss. And I go there into treatment, and for a little while, maybe the first 10 days, 14 days, I put up a bit of a fight. I was respectful of people there generally, but I put up a little bit of a fight in here. There's still resistance, massive resistance. What I'm aware of is, wow, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to pass my time. I'm bored. I'm rebellious. I'm antsy. I'm uncomfortable. I'm just aware of this thing, this ism. And there's no drugs and alcohol, right? So I'm not doing anything to take care of it the way I have been for the last 10 or 12 years or so. But there I am. And interestingly, and I remember this very vividly, there was also a relief. My consciousness was aware. My mind, my consciousness, my awareness was aware of a relief. The relief was, I don't have to fight so hard anymore to prove to the world that my way of being in the world is the right way. Because I've so dreadfully failed in my experiment, in my self-will. I've so dreadfully failed that if anyone ever had a doubt of what a fuck up I actually am, well, the doubt is gone now, because I'm in this place, and now the gloves can come off. The mask can come off. Yeah. I don't have to fight to try to convince somebody or to try to convince myself like this is okay. Because the way I've been living has not been okay. So I got that. Now, when I say I got that, you have to think how monumental that is of a shift for someone. I understood more than I used to. What it basically means is that kind of fight was over. The fight of, no, I'm okay. No, this is right. This is leading to a good place. I'm okay. This is how I'm supposed to be. This is how I'm supposed to live. I'm okay. It's great. I'm great. Everything's great. All of that nonsense was dashed. I still had an ego. The ego wasn't gone by any means. The ego was saying things like, we'll find a way through. We'll work the system. We'll manipulate. We'll do what we've always done. And we'll find a way through, and we'll somehow come out the other end, and we'll get to stay the same. We'll figure out a way to stay the same. See, that's that deep, 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 deep ego thing. So while I can tell you that the fight was over, I can also tell you that down in there was that ego. Even though the ego had been smashed upon the rocks, and just by stepping into treatment, I had experienced an ego death. The ego was already planning its comeback. I recognize that now. I did not recognize that then. But the important shift in consciousness that I had there was, I can no longer hold up this illusion. I can't be a crack addict and a heroin addict and claim that life is going swimmingly, as I have been. I've been hiding behind that lie, that illusion for so long. Now, 2 weeks into treatment, I am in the office with my counselor. She tells me to recount a story from my childhood that I start recounting to her about someone who was very near and dear to me in my childhood who ended up dying. And I start to cry. And I mean, it was one of those cries of a lifetime where you start to cry and you can't stop. And I mean, it's going for minutes. It's not a 60-second cry. It's like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 minutes of epic tears of you just collapsing in the realization of all of the emotion, all of the feeling that you buried for so many years from your childhood, of how much pain you had been carrying, but you didn't know it. And your counselor is there. She was right there with me, and she was so kind and so elegantly holding space for me to have this experience, this realization. And in that moment, a thought came into my mind. It's possible these people actually want the best for me. That is a monumental leap in consciousness. That is an aha moment. For someone who is fighting the system, rebelling against the system always, for me to think, have the thought come into my head and me to be able to hear it, my consciousness able to pick up that thought. Maybe these people could help me. Maybe they want the best for me. Maybe it's not me against the world. So that's a monumental leap in consciousness. Okay. So the rest of treatment, I really start to pay attention. I really start to feel better. I've dropped weight. I've dropped the weight of the world off of my shoulders. And I start to feel better, and I start to get some momentum. And I start to realize, like, wow, I'm going through each day without drugs and alcohol, and it has been a long, long time before that happened, and I'm starting to like it. In treatment, I told my counselor that I was ashamed of being thin, too thin, not strong, not in my body. I was ashamed of it. And I told her that I was ashamed of not being in shape that I hadn't been running. I hadn't been moving my body. And so in treatment, from that 2-week period forward, I started to run. I would go outside and I started to run, and then other people started to run with me. Other guys who were in treatment with me, they started to run, and we started to run together. And by the time I got out of treatment, I had run like 2 or 3 weeks in a row, every day. Not much, like a couple of miles, but I had run, and I started to move the body, and it started to feel good, and I started to feel high naturally. And that was very important because I didn't want the highs of my life to end. I didn't want the delightful feeling of being on a natural high or a high of any kind. I didn't want that to be gone. And since I wasn't going to be able to get it through drugs and alcohol, here was a moment where I recognized in the body that I could get high naturally. Think about that monumental leap in consciousness. When somebody who's been doing drugs and alcohol and engaging in addictive behavior gets to have a natural high for a number of days in a row, that's called building a new habit. And it's so important for people in recovery. I tell people, you should try to get high every day. And I'm not being funny. I mean it, obviously, I mean on a natural high. You should try to get high every single day. If you don't, you're going to start thinking, wow, maybe life's not enjoyable. Or maybe that was a thing that was only available to me on drugs and alcohol. And it's so not true. So we must go out into nature. We must move the body, use the breath, get out and do the things that make us feel so wonderful. Monumental shift in consciousness there. Now, I get out of treatment, and this is an interesting time. This first year out of treatment, I'm only going to 12-step meetings because I feel like I have to, and I'm not working any kind of program, no steps or anything. I'm not following any spiritual path. I don't have a teacher. I don't have a sponsor. I don't even have a therapist. What I call that is floating. That's floating. That's not expanding consciousness. That's not building awareness. What I'm doing is I'm doing the same thing I used to do. All right, I'm going to go to the meetings because I think I need them just to not use drugs. So that's the goal, the entire goal of my life. Don't use drugs. Okay. It's not a bad goal for the first month of your recovery. It's not a bad goal every day. But as you get into recovery, if you're building awareness and consciousness through work that you're going to do in recovery, you're going to want a lot more than just staying sober. That's why Recovery 2.0 is all about don't just survive addiction, thrive in every area of your life. But at the beginning, staying sober, going to bed each night sober, getting to meetings, talking to people in recovery, working the 12 steps, and having a sponsor, going through the steps with a sponsor, those are beautiful things. Those are so helpful. We know those are good practices when we're in early recovery. I wasn't doing any of those things. I was just hitting meetings by myself. So what I'm doing is I'm floating through life, and I'm oriented toward the outside world. What do I mean by that? I'm oriented towards people, meaning friendships. I'm oriented towards girls a whole lot of focus going there. So that's romance, sex, and the general feeling of being around girls and really pursuing lots of different people. So that's a fixation of the mind. Food, and generally I'm adventure seeking. That's what I was doing. The world will show me my joy. The world will show me my highs. Everything is out there. But in terms of dealing with me, with emotion, in building strength or vitality, really moving ahead in any kind of spiritual way, in a building consciousness kind of way, not happening. Not happening at all. So flatline through the first year. What happens when we flatline in recovery? This is a question for the group right now. Asking you guys, what happens when we flatline in recovery? Anybody? Anybody? Yeah, that's right. You guys, everybody nailed it. Relapse, 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 backslide, relapse, we go back. Exactly. Flatline. There is no flat line in recovery. If you are not building consciousness, building awareness in your life, then you are looking for more of the same, more of what you've gotten. And guess what? The universe is more than happy to give you what you're looking for until you finally hit your knees, get humble enough to surrender and to do the work that's necessary. And that's what happened to me. I relapsed, in and out, in and out, in and out for a little over a year, trying to stay sober for like a week or 2 weeks. I think maybe I might have made it a month once or twice, and then fall back again. And so I was just in this cyclical pattern of repeating the same behaviors again, because I was still at a level of consciousness. Where addiction and all the behaviors possible that go with addiction were going to take place. The only shot I had, I know this now, I didn't know this then. The only shot I had was to expand my awareness, to expand my consciousness, to see more than I was seeing, to see more clearly than I was seeing, to investigate my life, not out in the world, but my life in my heart and in my spirit as it related to the outside world. For if I could really engage in that self-inquiry, then I would be able to learn and to grow and to move forward along my, what I call the destiny path. And every one of us has a destiny path. It's our fulfillment in this life. Every one of us has the opportunity to be fulfilled in this life. And the only way to be fulfilled fully in this life is to walk along your own unique destiny path. So it requires self-inquiry to walk that path. I didn't have that at that point. So after about a year of mucking around in relapse, I got sober for the final time in this life. And at least to this point. And that was June 23rd, 1991. So now I'm 28 years sober, clean and sober, continuous abstinence. But continuous abstinence is not exactly the point, is it? It's a wonderful thing to say, I'm 28 years continuously sober. That's an amazing thing. But if I was 28 years continuously sober and miserable, well, I would question the efficacy of whatever I'm doing at this point in time. So you see, throughout the 28 years, here's what's been going on. First, I dedicated myself to the 12 steps. I worked with a sponsor, and I went through each of those steps to the best of my ability, and I've done it many, many, many times since then. But that first time, I kept asking the people around me, I kept asking, when will the miracle happen for me? When will it happen for me? And what was the miracle? The miracle was one thing that I was after. I want to wake up one day and be free from craving and thoughts about using drugs and alcohol. I wanted to be free. My consciousness at that time in my life had that as my main goal. And it was a wonderful goal because I wasn't there. I woke up any given day and I was thinking about using. It was something I had to get through a lot of those first days. I had to just get through the day. There were many times in the evening when I was craving using, and I would get on the phone and do what they told me to do, which was to pick up the phone and call my sponsor or get to a meeting, get around other people who were sober. And so I did that. And then I would get to bed sober and wake up the next morning and be so relieved that I didn't give away my recovery that night before. And I would have another day, My consciousness was set and starting to be aware of, all right, momentum and success here at this consciousness level is get to bed sober. Keep it simple. Get to bed sober. Okay, so I did that. And I did that day after day after day. I started to work the steps. My sponsor would have me read certain things or write certain things. And I would pray. My sponsor said, get down on your knees at the beginning of the day and just, even if you don't know what you're praying to, just say, please help me. please help me to stay sober today. That was it. It was a simple prayer. Whatever's out there, I don't understand you. I don't even know if you exist. Please just help me get through this day. And that was my consciousness at that point in time. And at the end of the day, I would pray, thank you so much for helping me stay sober today. And just saying, please help me, and then thank you, turned out to be a revolutionary act. A revolutionary act that created a sort of a continuous flow of hope and possibility. There was the gaining of some kind of energy that I can't describe to you. I can't put it into words, but there was definitely something that made me feel supported somehow by getting onto my knees, lowering my head, and asking for help. That's where my consciousness was at that point in time. And it was beautiful. I'd get some momentum. Now, somewhere around the 9th step, when I got to the 9th step and I made my 9th-step amends, and I obviously by this point I knew I was dedicated, and I knew I was really into this thing, and I was going to take it as far as it could take me. I woke up one day and I had my dream come true. My hope, my wish, my prayer was, wake up one day and be free from drugs and alcohol and craving. And I was. So I'm guessing that was about a year in. So that would put us into 1992. So for the last 27 years, I have not had a craving to use drugs or alcohol. Not ever once. Not ever once. It just was taken. Now, as I moved forth from that new level of consciousness, an interesting thing happened. I started to realize I'm confused about what to do with myself. Literally, what to do. Like, all right, how am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to do? I'm not sure what my job or my career would be. I've never really developed myself in that direction. I knew about going after girls. That was clear. I'll certainly keep doing that. I knew how to feed myself. I knew how to sort of live in a home somewhere. But what would I be doing in my life aside from just going to meetings, which were still very, very, very important to me? I knew that I could be helpful to someone else because I'd gotten through all 12 steps by this point, a little into my 2nd year of recovery. And my sponsor told me, you need to take somebody through the steps. You need to make yourself available. So all of a sudden, I placed myself into the position. Well, I went from a person who was thinking of themselves as the receiver of information, spiritual and otherwise, and an experience, spiritual and otherwise, that was necessary for me to survive and to move forward in my life in some way. I went from the receiver of that to a vehicle through which someone else could receive that. And that is another massive, massive shift in consciousness. Do you understand what I'm saying as I describe it? Each of these shifts? Does it make sense to you? Okay, so I'm at that next level now. I'm free from drugs and alcohol, at least in my mind each day. I still have to do the things that I've been told to do. I have to go to meetings and show up and be of service where I can be. And now I need to take someone else through these steps. So I gotta tell you, a lot of people say, I've done the steps, I've worked through the steps. I'll ask them, did you take somebody else through the steps? And they say, no, I've never done that. How long are you sober? 6 years, 5 years, 2 years, 10 years, 20 years. I'm like, don't deprive yourself of the greatest gift of these steps. Is not the steps themselves. It's you getting to take someone else through the steps. That's where the action is. That's where the juice is. I mean, that's when the magic starts taking place through you. And I'll tell you what, when you make yourself available to another human being in that way, trust me when I say good things are coming. Good things are coming. You will be put to use. You will not have to ask, God, what do I do with myself? How could I be helpful here? And I don't mean that. I don't mean that your entire life is going to become, now you're just taking people through the steps. You're of service when you can be, and you're of service, and you take someone through the steps when they ask you. And as a result of doing that, opportunities, avenues, streets, there are going to be signs, street signs are going to show up for you. You're going to know which way to turn. We're talking about the development of intuition, the development of a capacity to know what to do in your decision-making process each day. Keeping it very simple at the beginning, in program speak, recovery speak, they talk about just do the next right thing. Well, the next right thing is a monumental leap in consciousness right there. Because who was stuck in addiction, in craving, in that kind of suffering, you're not able to do the next right thing, nor are you even able to know what that might even be. Because you're not at the consciousness level yet where you could actually do the next right thing. And guess what the beauty of community is? When you're a part of a community, whether that's a yoga community, a recovery community, a fellowship of the 12 steps or other, when you don't know the next right thing to do, you have tons of people around you that you trust and that you can ask. My goodness, it really works. So through the first number of years of recovery, I'm starting to sponsor guys. Guess what? Some of them are not staying sober. Some of them are not listening to instructions. And I'm going to my sponsor and saying, God, I'm trying my best here, but they're not getting it. And he would say, well, let's review what, what's going on. And he'd say, are you teaching the steps the way that we went through them together? And I said, yes, just like we did it. And he's like, well, it may not be their time yet. Keep trying. Always keep the door open for them. Just keep trying, But the fact is that some of them would stay sober. Some of them became dear friends, and some of them didn't become dear friends, but they became sober people and a lot happier. And one thing for sure is that I was staying sober. And I could see that if I could just stay sober and stay open and do the best I could to help other people, I was starting to really see magic. Beautiful things take place, extraordinary things. And it went on like this for the first 9 years. 5, 6, 7 years. 7, 8, and 9 interesting years, because what happened was life had been happening, particularly around my relationships with women. You knew this was going to catch up to me sooner or later. And so the universe saw that I needed to go to yet another level of consciousness. But in order to get to that level of consciousness, I was going to have to face a deeper level of wound, a deeper level of healing that needed to take place. And it had to do with codependency. That core disease of lost self. That core disease of lost self. Still looking for myself. I'm all outward focused still. Now I've done a lot of self-inquiry. I wasn't only outward focused. I had worked those steps, and the steps tell you, look inside. Look to your experience. Examine your life. These are very important things, and they serve me well. Now I was being asked to go to a deeper level. Why do I know I was being asked to do that? Because I was in extraordinary pain. It's always pain. There's a pain, and then there's a proposed method of relief. If the proposed method of relief keeps you stuck in the pattern, we call that addiction. So my proposed method of relief was still seeking women, adventure seeking, never stopping, never calming down. I'm still stuck. I'm stuck in a frequency of addiction. Even though I've come a long way, there was a long way to go. So what happened there is, the interesting thing was, I started to have so much pain, and I was going to lots and lots of meetings, and I'd been sponsoring people, but I wasn't getting better. Somewhere in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and in other texts, it talks about the time may come for us to need outside help. Outside meaning not through the 12 steps, but professional help. And so I started to reach out to people and find a therapist for myself who could help me with this issue that I was struggling with. And I found an incredible woman. Later on, I would find an incredible man, and they became two of the most important people in my life. Therapists who could help me day by day, week by week, unravel the confused and conditioned thought process for me around my relationships with women. And it led ultimately to, in a number of years, it led to the beginning of my relationship with my now current wife, Kia. And it led to the ability to stick around in relationship through great discomfort, and to look at my behavior and my thinking in a different way, and to develop a deeper relationship with myself, and therefore a deeper relationship with someone else. And that's a monumental shift in consciousness. So to review, I had been off drugs for 9 or 10 years. I'd had lots of different kinds of relationships. And many of them were very beautiful and very loving and heartfelt, but they all ended in struggle. And I had a very hard time finding peace and finding contentment. And I wanted it so badly, but I had no idea. I wouldn't have known how to get it if it smacked me right upside the head. And I started to move down a path towards that, because the prayer was, help me. It was no longer help me stay sober today. It was help me stay sober today. It was help me stay connected today. Language was changing. It was help me stay out of other forms of craving today. Help me do whatever I need to do to be of maximum service to myself and others. What would that look like? And I remember my therapist saying to me something to the effect of, you don't often appear sober, even though I know you're not using drugs and alcohol. And that was painful to hear, especially because I knew it was the truth. But it was calling for me to go deeper. There was a calling to go deeper and to find a level of peace. The same thing happened around money. And that's a whole nother topic, which we don't need to get into, but it's the same topic. Levels of consciousness, awareness, levels of movement forward, not just thinking differently, but being literally aware of more. It's almost like you can only see this, but then all of a sudden, like, your vision opens up and you have this much, much more holistic and complete way of seeing things in the world, and understanding your position in the world, and understanding where you plug into things and how it works. This all led to the door of a man named Guru Prem, a practitioner and teacher of Kundalini yoga, a loving and caring and contented man who would become my life's teacher and would change my life forever. He would introduce me to a way of thinking and a way of being that would squarely place me beyond craving altogether, beyond addiction altogether. It wasn't that there weren't good days and challenging days. But the things that used to baffle me no longer did. And new opportunities became available for me that were never available before. The opportunity to be in relationship with somebody. The opportunity to have a deeper level of intimacy with myself and another. The opportunity to learn over time how I could be of use in the world, to learn my unique gifts and how they could plug in. Not to apologize for myself for being different anymore, or feeling that somehow I had to fit in, and not needing any longer to prove myself to anybody, but realizing that my purpose was to improve, always. And so that was that next level. Now the next level of consciousness, and I want this to hit home for you, included the practices of yoga and meditation, included the philosophies, the foundational and ethical philosophies of yoga. It was a direct dovetail with the 12-step teachings. We talked about things on the path of yoga like rigorous honesty, like showing up, self-reflection, self-correction. But there were these added elements, these added vitamins in the path of yoga, which I hadn't encountered in the 12 steps, and that was Kriya. Kriya yoga, yoga in action. The physical practice of yoga, yes. Also the emotional practice of yoga, the meditational practice of yoga, the relational practice of yoga, so that yoga all of a sudden became threaded through every aspect of your life. That it wasn't like recovery. When I was floating and flatlining in early recovery, I had no involvement in it. Now recovery is threaded through the cells of my body, it's threaded through my life, it's threaded through every action, every breath, every thought. Recovery is a part of me. It's a beautiful, amazing thing that I accept into the very core of every one of my cells. Yoga became the same thing. It wasn't that you would go to a studio and practice yoga and then go home. The studio was a place to practice. Everywhere else was a place to live your yoga. So when yoga got in the way of my life, I just made yoga. I just made my life yoga. And that was a quantum leap in consciousness. So where am I today? To wrap up our talk for this evening, where I am today is every given day I've seen as another opportunity. It's like a unit. Each day, each 24-hour period is a unit within a greater whole, like a tapestry. Each day is an opportunity to work on the very same things that I've spoken to you about. That I still must hit the mat, my yoga mat. I still must do my practice, connect with people, be around other folks who are in recovery, understand that the center purpose of my life is to be of service. The center purpose of my life is to be of service. The center purpose of my life is to be of service. My joy comes from there. My bliss comes from there. All my joy and bliss come from being of service. Whether I'm being of service to someone like you, my wife, in the way that I speak and treat her, whether I'm being of service just to people that I might encounter in the world, if I'm carrying a nice energy, a smile with me wherever I go, or am I being snotty and obnoxious and negative? These are things that I have to look at every single day. I have to look at it every single day. I'm telling you right now, I'm 28 years sober, and every single day is another day where I might have a really bad day. Or more likely, I'm going to have a really good day if I do the things that are required of me at my current level of consciousness. What does my current level of consciousness ask me for? I want you to write that down. Please write down the question. What does my current level of consciousness ask of me? What are the things that I know I have to do in order to make this a better day than not a better day? Every one of us has those answers. You have the answer in your mind right now. It's not even something you have to think too hard about. You know what you need to do to build the best day possible for yourself. at your current level of consciousness. And for me, as I've told you, it's changed as my level of consciousness expanded. The things that I needed to do in my life expanded and changed along with it. So today, it doesn't really matter, in a way, what I need to do. It's just what I need to do. The point is I must do it. I must do it each day, or I'll have an experience of what it felt like not to do those things and to, experience a day by choice, slightly less aligned, slightly less harmonious. And maybe I needed just to tell myself or show myself, this is what happens when you're off center. What will you do now? Do I have another level of consciousness waiting for me? Of course I do. I always will, as long as I'm in this body. I will always be on a never-ending path of discovery and an effort towards greater awareness and consciousness, always. What's the next thing coming for me? I have absolutely no idea. That's the whole point, is I'm just stepping into the unknown. I'm going to continue to do my practices. Whenever pain or challenge comes up, I pay particular attention because I know that is the currency for my next level of transformation. My pain will be the currency for my next level of transformation. And I also have another currency that I can use rather than having to always be in pain in order to change. I can also rely upon the wisdom of other people. The wisdom of other people, or the wisdom of the universe, of God, as it expresses itself to me through other people or through other means. So we have those currencies that we can use. We can rely upon the wisdom of other people, which I strongly suggest and encourage, or we can learn from the school of hard knocks. When we get into pain, we take a look at what we're doing, and then we start to talk to people who've been through that before. They educate us, they uplift us, they teach us, and we move into that next level of consciousness yet again. So you see, recovery consciousness is not a commitment to always being happy. It's not it shouldn't bring about an expectation that that's what's going to happen. Quite the contrary. It's simply a commitment to continually be in a process of evolution, to inquire within, to use the joy and challenge of your life to direct you, constantly build intuition, constantly build your ability to know what to do next, what the next right thing is for you. And I will finish on this. I have lied, but I am not a liar. I have stolen, but I am not a thief. And I have cheated, but I am not a cheat. I did those behaviors from within a consciousness where those behaviors could take place. In the consciousness of addiction, those behaviors are normal, almost expected. In fact, it would be weird for us to say to an addict, "Oh my God, I can't believe you just lied to me." It's ridiculous. We know that from that consciousness, from that force field, that frequency, of course a person's going to lie. That's what's there. And now, most importantly, I'm in a consciousness where those behaviors would be intolerable for me. I couldn't live with them. So that doesn't mean that I have never lied for 27 years. It doesn't mean I've never done things that are against my own value system for 27 years. It means that when those things happen, you better believe I'm aware of it immediately, and that an action has to be taken in order for me to correct what's just taken place. That it's impossible to live as a human being without forgiving myself in an ongoing way. So my current consciousness says to me, Tommy, you have to walk in a constant shower of self-forgiveness. You have to walk in a constant shower of self-forgiveness. You're going to make mistakes, it's okay. Learn from your mistakes, try not to make the same ones twice, and then move forward. Learn everything you can. Be of service. Have a sign on your head to the sky that says open for business. Don't get too caught up in anything in particular. Definitely don't get too caught up in yourself. And move forward through this life with elegance and grace. Be kind to the people, especially yourself and others. And things tend to work out pretty good. Things tend to work out pretty good. Now, if you're stuck, don't despair. There are going to be periods in our recovery, and I know it's coming for me too, where we get stuck again. We don't shy away from being stuck. We're not even surprised when we get stuck. No matter how long we've been sober, we know enough to know now that that's part of the human condition. Forgive yourself. Learn what you can learn from being stuck. And very soon, you're going to find yourself free again at your next level of consciousness in this never-ending path of discovery. And you'll recognize the beautiful gift you've been given, which is beyond description, beyond words. And you'll smile to yourself. And you'll say something like, wow. Wow. Bring the palms together at the heart center. Let's end with the Recovery 2.0 prayer. Universe, put me in the places you want me to be, with the people you want me to be with, doing the things you want me to do. Thank you for the joys and challenges of my life. Amen. Love you guys just so much. So appreciate your commitment, your dedication. Thank you for being here tonight. We went over a little bit, but we had about an hour together, so I'm glad. And yeah, bless you, love you. Make it a great week, and look forward to much more. I do want to say that the most exciting things of my entire life in terms of creativity, in terms of creating systems that can be helpful to people in recovery and people stuck in addiction and those in recovery, are coming within the Recovery 2.0 membership. And I can't wait to share it with you all and tell you more about it as the weeks and the months go by here. So love. Satnam, we'll speak soon.